Hello, Sioux Falls, and welcome to Planning Preview for the month of November. My name is Jason Bieber with the Planning and Development Services Office with the City of Sioux Falls. And joining me, as always, is our Planning Commission Chair, Kurt Johnson. Thanks for stopping by today, Kurt.
Love it, Jason. Thank you for having me. We got kind of I'll call it a quality agenda, not so much maybe quantity, so we got a little time here. But that said, we'll just dive right in. Our first item looks like a rezoning single family to a twin home and suburban district on the west side. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this one?
Yeah, so this is kind of that west side with 5th and La Mesa area. You know, it's kind of a lot more of the twin home, town home type uses. So
Sure.
This was a remnant single family lot, and the applicant's just looking at constructing a twin home on there. So
very good. Yeah, that's a good use. Just retask it as you need to. Our next one, it looks like we're rezoning from a single family suburban district to a conservation district type scenario, east side location here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this one?
Yeah, as you kind of know, it kind of looks a little different when we get conservation, but really those are really for detention ponds or maybe drainage areas as part of these subdivisions. As they kind of continue to build out, they need more drainage areas, and so some of those zonings that they originally had, you know, now has to be areas to be able to get drainage to take it to the city detention ponds. So.
Oh, very good, and thank you for saying it that way. It's a little segue there. Conservation, I think, maybe for the folks at home, it often gets confused with the city owns and operates or takes care of all of those properties, and that's not necessarily the case, correct?
No, not necessarily. You know, in some of the newer areas, though, we really like to do, the city here likes to have what we call those regional detention ponds. If you see the really large ones, and those the city does maintain, and really what we want with those is the entire development can drain into one pond, and then we maintain it to make sure that it kind of stays up to city standards. It's worked out a lot better than some of these infill type developments where there's a little detention pond for every development. Why do that? Why not just have one large one, and then the city can maintain it, and we obviously have staff at the Parks Department to can mow it and kind of make sure that it's functioning properly.
Oh, very good. Thank you for that. Our next item that we'll talk about here looks like an RE2 apartment residential moving to a single family residential. Don't see that too often. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this one?
Yeah, so this is kind of an area that most people don't know, Botel Place. It's really west of 29, south of 12th Street, and north of 26th Street, kind of back in there. Okay. The applicant is just looking at, there's some existing lots back there. Some of them are zoned apartments, but it's really developed more as a twin home development, and there's a larger lot that he's just looking at building a single family house instead of an apartment.
Very good. Our next item here looks like quite a few, must be a planned development perhaps, or tell us a little bit about this one. There's a lot going on with this one.
Yep, so this is kind of one of those things that are starting to develop along Veterans Parkway. You know, we made the connection all the way up to 90, and within the next 4 or 5 years we'll finish the loop all the way around to the T exit. So this is property that actually is just north of Menards kind of area that fronts Veterans Parkway. It was currently zoned a bunch of different things, obviously, as you can see on the agenda there, but really now they're figuring out what they actually want to do there. So they're mix and matching a couple of things, still trying to provide those transitions, but with the amount of traffic that's coming on Veterans Parkway now, some more higher density probably is going to go there, and really it gets people more excited about the land there and people actually wanting to develop it now with the quick and easy access to Veterans Parkway and then out.
Yeah, very good, and that's good to see too, because as you get closer to those major thoroughfares, you do want to see a step back away, and that's good to see that plan coming to fruition like that. Our next item, rezoning single family to O office. East 77th, this is kind of south, isn't it?
Yeah, so this is kind of an area that's 77th and Cliff. There's kind of some offices that are just to the south of the church that's there. The church has actually agreed to sell a little bit of property to one of these office uses, which they want to do to expand their parking lot a little bit. So just one of those things where the church doesn't need it anymore and this office use can utilize it. So really just getting a little bit more parking for their clientele for their office.
Very good. Looks like the last item we'll chat about here is a conditional use permit on South Minnesota Avenue.
Yeah, and this is the old VFW site. The applicant, I think, is still trying to figure out exactly what he wants to do with that, if it's keeping the existing building or tearing that down and building a new building. But this will give them the ability to do some on-sale alcohol there if they wanted to do, a casino or a restaurant bar or something that kind of fits in with that general area of the city. So.
Well, that's great, Jason. I can't wait to hear more about this one.
Yeah, we got some items on this agenda, not as many as normally, but we are getting to the end of the year, and that's usually where our caseload goes down a little bit. So.
Sure.
Yep, but thanks for joining us, Kurt, and
Thank you.
Stay tuned, Sioux Falls. After the break, we have Fletcher from our office, who's been working hard on the Minnesota Avenue corridor study and is almost ready to actually present that to the Planning Commission City Council. So he's going to give us a little update on that and talk about what has gone into that and really what the future of Minnesota Avenue will look like. So stay tuned.
Hey, this is Seth and I work for the City of Sioux Falls in the Housing Division. Today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about gutters and why it's important to make sure that your gutters are clean going into the winter. I know right now it looks nice and sunny and warm, but real soon, as we all know, it's going to get cold and water's going to freeze. And so if you see this gutter right here is full of leaves and even has a little bit of dirt, if that's left long enough, you'll actually get vegetation growing out of your gutters. And that's a really bad thing for a couple reasons. Water can build up and actually sag your gutters if they're plugged, and it changes the slope of the gutter. So it no longer pushes the water down to the downspout and out. It actually gets into a little sag in the middle of the gutter, and it'll actually tear your gutter off, or your gutter will come off because of that. One last thing with gutters I'd like to explain to you is when they get plugged up, they actually cause the water to back up into the roof. And if you've heard of ice dams on your roof, oftentimes it starts with your gutter. And so water freezes in your gutter and ice above the gutter melts. And somewhere in the middle, there's water that is just sitting there that can't get out down the roof. So ultimately, keeping your gutters clean is a really important thing to do to your home. It's pretty simple. If you can just climb up on usually a 6 or 8 foot ladder is plenty big enough. Grab some handfuls and clean it out. And if you can't get up on a ladder, paying somebody to do this is worth it. Thanks for watching today's Home Maintenance Minute.
Welcome back, Sioux Falls, and thanks for joining us for the second half of Planning Preview. Joining me right now is Fletcher from Planning and Development Services to give us a little update on the Minnesota Avenue Corridor Plan that you've been working on probably for a year or so. So thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I've been working on it since I started with the city about a year and a half ago. It's a corridor study looking at Minnesota Avenue and the land uses adjacent to that corridor. From Russell Street south to 3rd Street. And so in that area, what we're looking at is creating a document which will provide recommendations to the Planning Commission and City Council on land use decisions within that corridor.
Yeah, that's great. And I think one of the great things that the corridor study that you're working on now, with the amount of money that Public Works has put into that section now of Minnesota, from Russell to 3rd Street, it really kind of gives you an idea of, hey, this is what Minnesota is going to look like. It's going to be a lot more walkable, and hopefully that'll spur some other higher intensity uses along that big corridor. And I think maybe that's kind of some of the stuff that you're looking to put into that, or put in the plan to get kind of approved.
So two of the key things we provided within this report is a map with influence areas, redevelopment being along Minnesota Avenue. Someone could come in, rezone to commercial and completely redevelop that area. A transition area where we would see redevelopment to higher density residential uses. And then there are existing historic neighborhoods in this area, and we want to maintain some of that housing, which is affordable housing in the city. Yeah,
and I think that's a great point, is that section of Minnesota Avenue, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I know Public Works' plan and possibly yours from the planning aspect is to really redo Minnesota Avenue all the way down to the interchange on 57th Street. And each section of Minnesota Avenue is a little bit different, and I think this section is really unique because, like you said, there's some of those existing houses that are right on Minnesota Avenue, which maybe in the future they're not the highest and best use for that, but we also got existing homes that are just to the west of those, and as you get kind of a block east and west of Minnesota that, like you said, are in historical districts or historical homes where they're owner occupied and people that want to stay there for a long time. So trying to blend those two things in, commercial and higher density, but protect that single family neighborhood is probably one of the big things that you guys had to work on with this particular plan. And I know you did some public engagement. How much did you guys do on that, or how much did you meet with the neighborhood?
And that's a great thing. We did work with our Public Works Department when they brought forward the design for the Minnesota Avenue corridor, how they were going to reconstruct. And at that time, we were being more conservative, and we were thinking people in the neighborhood would rather keep the single family and low density development in the area. And what we found from the neighbors that spoke to us and left comments was that they were actually for redevelopment along the corridor and higher density residential in a bigger transition area, which surprised us, but we included it in the plan. And really we hope to see, hope this will spur development, but mainly it's going to be a document that provides a way for Planning Commission and City Council to make decisions in the future. Yeah, and I like you said, it's going to probably start happening a little bit sooner than later now with that street that's already put in between Russell and 3rd Street. I think that's just gives people such a different idea of what Minnesota Avenue is going to be, and really will hopefully spur some development. So I think it's good that you're going to get that plan approved. And what's the timeline on that phase 1 for your first plan? Well, it's been a long process, but our hope is to get it to Planning Commission and then onward to City Council for approval. And currently we're starting work on phase 2. We'll be sending out a survey to the public and hopefully get some initial reaction on what things they like in phase 2, which will go from 3rd Street down to the railroad tracks south of 14th Street. And so we're looking at what's the influence area there, and that this next segment has a lot of issues which will be interesting to work around, like the downtown area, the city and county administration buildings. You've got a couple historic districts on the west side, and then really having a very, very limited smaller area for redevelopment. But I think there's still that opportunity, especially close to downtown, and seeing some of the development that's happening downtown, this is definitely an opportunity. Yeah, and so then you'll go, like you indicated, you're getting close to start on phase 2, and then I believe you guys you're looking at doing phase 3 and 4 to keep kind of moving your way south. Is all the way down to 41st Street, like I indicated, over the interstate there. Is that correct? Absolutely, yeah. This will be. We're trying to get some framework for these type of corridor studies in place, so that even if someone came on in the future and took them over, they would have a template to go off of. This is just the first corridor, or the third corridor we're actually looking at. But there are future corridors which need improvement, and hopefully as construction projects from the city come along, we can look at those corridors as well. Yeah, and I think that's the great point you just made is when we're working together with Public Works on those big investments into our existing corridors like Minnesota Avenue, to be able to correspond that with a corridor study, because we do expect, if we're putting quite a bit of money into the street, we do expect some of those corridors to keep redeveloping, and maybe some of the things that were developed 40, 50 years ago is maybe not the way that we develop today. So I think that's great that, like you said, that you continue to work with Public Works, and you guys can kind of meet with the neighborhood together and talk about two aspects of it. So I think that's great. But you said that you were going to send out postcards here to the neighborhood for phase 2 to the railroad tracks. Is that expecting that to go out
before the end of the year kind of a deal, or?
It'll go out before the end of the year just to get a quick little online survey, get people engaged. Then we'll do some background research into some of the plans that the city's adopted in the past, some existing data on home ownership rates and that type of information for the neighborhood. And then once we get potentially a draft map put together and some recommendations, we'll bring it to the public again for further input.
To continue. And I think that's one of the great things that you guys do, and Public Works does a great job too, is engaging the public. So, you know, you expect to be able to have a couple opportunities for the public to meet with you and engineering on that phase 2 of that specific project. So I think it's great. I'm glad that we're going to be able to get this coming forward. So I appreciate your hard work on it, and that'll be such a good template from for your side, you know, for us current planners to be able to utilize when we're actually meeting with developers that maybe want to change something up or want to do something different along Minnesota Avenue. It gives us an idea of, hey, what can we support or what would we look at this intersection? So I think you did a great job, and it'll be great having it come forward to Planning Commission and City Council. So
yeah, it's exciting, and you know, not just current planning, but hopefully we can help a lot of departments throughout the city. Housing, I know, definitely looks at this as well. So yeah, very excited to get first one in.
Yep, coordination is good, and we always like to do that. So thanks for joining me, Fletcher.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll have to have you back for phase 2 because you're only 25% done, right? You got phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. So you still got
Absolutely.
3 shots here yet, right?
Definitely.
All right. And thanks for joining us, Sioux Falls, for planning preview for the month of November. Just to reiterate, the meeting this month is on Wednesday, November 2nd at 6 p.m. at the Carnegie Town Hall. We appreciate anybody coming to have any questions or concerns or voice their opinions on any of the items that we talked about here today. Otherwise, we do have that 5-minute comment period at the end of the agenda for you to come and talk about anything planning related. So thanks, Sioux Falls, and have a great day.